Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
Everybody look at your hands.
This is firefighter Lionel Crowther from the Winnipeg Fire Department, and you're listening to Dr. Richard Gasaway on SA Matters Radio. The SA Matters mission is simple. They want to help us see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hello and welcome to episode 38 of Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gasaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple, to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. Okay, before we get too deep into this episode, I want to pause and offer my sincerest appreciation to Midwest Fire for signing on to be the sponsor of the SA Matters radio show for the entire year 2015. This is huge. I had an opportunity late last year to visit their factory. At the time, we were in discussions about them sponsoring the radio show, and before I would commit, I needed to see firsthand for myself their facility and meet their staff and determine if the quality of their trucks met my high standards. I'm kind of funny that way. I don't want to attach my name to any product that might be less than superior in quality or craftsmanship. Well, all I can say is, wow. The staff of the factory was amazing. They have very high standards for the quality, and most of their employees have been with their company for a very long time. And I can tell you this, Midwest Fire, they take care of their employees. And for me, that was huge. It speaks volumes about their internal commitment. And in turn, it shows in the quality of the trucks that they build. If you're thinking about buying a new engine, a mini pumper, or a pumper tanker, check them out, MidwestFire.com. That's MidwestFire.com. I also want to thank Midwest Fire for sponsoring a giveaway of one of my programs last year at FDIC in Indianapolis. The winner, Loveland Fire Department in Colorado, is scheduled to have a full-day situational awareness seminar on March 14th, funded 100% by Midwest Fire. Gestures like that speak volumes to Midwest Fire's commitment not only to building great fire trucks, but also to their passion for improving firefighter safety. I'm coming to you today from Miami, Florida, where I'm attending a conference for professional speakers, learning how to sharpen my craft and improve my delivery of my message for my community of learners, the first responders. When I left St. Paul, it was minus 25 with the wind chill. And when I arrived in Miami, it was 76. That's more than 100-degree swing in temperature. Boy, do I think I picked a good time and a good location for a self-development program. I'm working hard to recruit new members to the SA Matters community of learners, and I'd like to have you as a member. You can join for free. There are over 5,000 members sharing ideas on how to improve situational awareness and how to make better decisions under stress. If you're interested in joining the SA Matters community, you can go to samatters.com, click on the red box on the right side of the homepage. And I've added a bonus for new members joining the community of learners. You'll get a couple of neat things. One, well, it's free. You can't beat that. Two, you'll get a special report that I've created just for the new members called 25 Best Practices for Improving First Responder Safety. You get that sent to you automatically in your email when you sign up. Three, you'll be connected with me, and I will be sending you a newsletter once a month on topics related to the Situational Awareness Matters mission. And four, and this is a big one, in celebration of the 3-year anniversary of SA Matters, I'm going to be sending out some free video mini courses that will focus on how the brain learns and how we're training first responders to fail. I'll also be sending out some best practices for how to fix these problems. You might want to be sure that support@richgasaway.com is on your safe senders list in your email. Otherwise, the emails that contain video links might go to your junk mail folder. And based on the live programs that I've done on this topic and the feedback that I've gotten from people in those live programs, these are going to be videos that you're going to want to watch. So be looking in your inbox. They'll be coming out soon. If you're not a member yet, head over to samatters.com website and sign up today. Following a recent episode where I interviewed a close call survivor, I started receiving multiple emails asking for how to contact the guest. And that's when I realized, I haven't made mention of the fact that every episode of SA Matters Radio has a corresponding show notes page on the SA Matters website. All 38 episodes do. All you need to do is to go to the show notes is go to samatters.com / and then enter the episode number. So this is episode 38. So you'd open up a browser, go to samatters.com / 38. It takes you to the page. It contains a link to the episode. So you can play it right there on the website. And then you can also sign up for the feed from iTunes or Stitcher Radio. And then it also contains a summary of the things that were talked about in the episode, including some takeaways. And there might be some pictures, there might be some video, there might be some audio. Depends on what information that the guest provides for me. I'd like to take a moment to thank some of the recent SA Matters live tour event program hosts. These events couldn't be possible without the commitment and support of our program hosts. And recently I was in Brighton Township Fire Department the Sunday after Christmas, thanks to Gary Gordon, who attended one of my programs earlier in the year and arranged to have me come to Brighton Township. So thanks and a shout out to you, Gary, for arranging that. Upcoming on January 14th, I'll be at Maple Grove, Minnesota, doing two programs, a morning program and evening program on situational awareness. January 16th for our Nevada Fire Department in Colorado. January 20th, the Castle Rock Fire Department. January 23rd, Minnesota Rural Electric Association in St. Cloud, Minnesota. January 26th and 27th, Firehouse World, two programs in San Diego. So if you're going to be there, get connected up with me there. January 31, the Wisconsin Indian Head Technical College, doing a program for them in Rice Lake. February 16th to 18th, and be at the Toledo, Ohio Fire Department, doing programs for their officers and battalion chiefs. February 27th, the Michigan Association of Fire Chiefs, doing a program for them in Midland. February 28th to March 1, a Company Officer Development Institute in Terre Haute. That's part one of a two-part program in Terre Haute. And then March 2 to 6, the Company Officer Development Program for the Indianapolis Airport Fire Department. And then March 7-8, back in Terre Haute for the second part of the Company Officer Development Institute. If you're interested in seeing the program venues and dates, just go to samatters.com, click on the Program and Keynotes tab, and then go over to the Event Schedule tab. Check back often because the programs are updated frequently and new programs are added fairly often. Here's hoping that I'll be conducting a program near you and we'll have an opportunity to meet up. I love meeting up with the people who are connected with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, the website, the podcast. I love it. Just love meeting people who are passionate about this mission. If you're interested in hosting a program for your department or association, then go to the SA Matters website and click on the Contact Us link. If you want to get connected with me on social media, you can follow @RichGasaway or @SA Matters on Twitter. On those feeds, I share out messages related to safety and occasionally some interesting news tidbits and once in a while some personal messages about my travels and about my family. What you're getting on Twitter is guaranteed to be 100% authentic and genuine me, warts and all. My tweets are always appropriate for all audiences, and if anyone follows me or posts a message that is offensive or vulgar, you can rest assured that message will be removed and that person will be blocked from my feed. There are other Twitter feeds out there that someone can go to and read all that garbage. So I don't have it on mine. You can get your fill of that somewhere else if that's what you're looking for. Thank you to the nearly 13,000 who are connected with me and engaged with me on Twitter. You can also get connected with me on Facebook by liking the SA Matters page, and you can also get connected with me on LinkedIn. Thank you to the more than 8,000 who are connected with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, on a side note, if I would want to thank the LinkedIn associates who I am connected with for the nearly 4,000, I can't believe that, 4,000 endorsements and recommendations that I've received on LinkedIn. I'm truly humbled and sincerely appreciate the faith in my mission and my message. Okay, the housekeeping's over. Let's jump into our interview for today. This episode is an interview with Dr. Burt Clark, author of the recently released book, I Can't Save You, But I'll Die Trying, The American Fire Culture. Dr. Clark shares his passion for firefighter safety and the need to change our culture. During the interview, we discuss the themes of his upcoming book, including the firefighter's genes: fast, close, wet, risk, injury, and death. Seatbelts save lives, so why don't we wear them? Mayday, mayday, mayday. Do you know when to call it? He shares best practices. We talk about the pursuit for higher education. And he shares his list. Actually, I read the list, but he shared it in his book of the best fire departments in America from research that he conducted based on some criteria in a book called In Search of Excellence. And his research, that research is a little dated, but it's still an interesting list because many of the fire departments on that list are fire departments that I have been to and conducted situational awareness programs for, and I certainly agree they are among some of the best fire departments that I have ever seen. So without any further ado, let's jump into our interview with Dr. Burt Clark. I'm really pleased today to have with me as my guest Dr. Burt Clark. I've known Dr. Clark or known of Dr. Clark, which I think you told me before the interview, Burt, to call you Burt, but I have a hard time doing that. I've known you or of you almost my entire fire service career, and there are very few people that I can say have influenced my way of thinking about safety as much as you have. When we were having a conversation before setting this interview up, and you'd sent me a draft of the book, and as I was looking through it, there are very few people that I talk to that, as they're talking about their position on safety, that I shake my head as much as I, in an affirmative way, as I shake my head when I'm talking with you. You really, really get it. And thanks for coming on and being a guest on my show today.
Well, Rich, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now that you've codified the fact that I'm an old guy, because I've been around longer than you have, thanks for that plug, buddy.
You've been you got into fire service, I think, Burt, when I was probably in grade school.
Oh, that makes me feel even better. Yeah, that's
a good place to start off on this conversation might be for those folks in the fire service or maybe newer that don't know who you are and where you've been and what you've done. Let's just start by giving you a chance. I know this is hard to do because you're a humble man, but frame up your background and where you were and how you've got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you something I really haven't talked about before, is that, it really even starts before I went into the fire service, because I didn't join the fire service until 1970 in Kentland Volunteer Fire Department in PG County. But before that, as a young child, from probably about the age 10 until I was 20, basically, I came up in the YMCA system, specifically the aquatic program. So that's where my mom took me to learn how to swim. And so I took to that. I liked that environment. So I can remember my first classes at the YMCA. I was just like 10 years old or something, and I was learning how to swim and didn't know how to swim. And lo and behold, I was the tallest 10-year-old they had. So so I was invited, and the classes. I remember the classes. The younger kids were in the morning, at no, the older kids were in the morning, and the younger kids came later in the day. So since I could stand up in the deep end, and my head was above the water, the next classes that came in, they were shorter, so they couldn't stand up in the shallow end of the pool. So very early on, they invited me, with permission of my mother, to stay over after my classes to help the younger people. And without even knowing what was happening, I was learning how to help people learn, because there's nothing, in many cases, more frightening for a child than being around water when they know they can't swim.
Yeah.
So you have to overcome that fear, and then you have to make them comfortable. And you're teaching a psychomotor skill. There's nothing more psychomotor than swimming. But it's about getting your mind and your body moving. So when I look back, that was very influential in how I saw the world, and I just kept progressing through that process. And eventually, I think I was about 17 years old, and I took over the Learn to Swim program for the Rollway YMCA in New Jersey for the whole Saturday morning program. And again, that was very influential. So I kind of got the merit badges and learned how to do it. Then became a lifeguard and a swimming instructor, and just loved that occupation, and just found joy in it, and helping people. You know, when somebody's drowning, they want you to come help them, and it was very rewarding for me. And I also think another critical piece of it was that academically, I was a below average student because I had a learning disability. But when it came to the psychomotor aspect of learning, I learned that very quickly, and then I was able to help other people learn it. And I didn't have to know how to spell the words to be able to teach somebody how to swim. You know, there's no paper and pencil test for swimming. So I excelled, and I became very good at it. And even after I went to college and got married for the first time, I stayed in the YMCA system as an aquatic instructor. And because I moved up through the chairs, and I became a professional YMCA aquatic instructor. And I figured that's going to be my career. And then lo and behold, I'm 20. It's August 1970, and I moved to Maryland. And my wife sends me up the street for some bread or something, and it's a Saturday, and I come out of the grocery store, and across the street's the Kentland Volunteer Fire Department. And I have no idea why I did it. I just walked across the street and went into the firehouse. No fire trucks were there, but the doors were up. The only other living thing there was the dog, a Dalmatian. And later on, I learned his name was Halligan. And next thing you know, the fire trucks come back, and all the guys are in softball uniforms, all dusty and dirty. They had been out playing softball. So they asked me if I played softball. I said yes. They handed me a can of beer. They said, "Do you drink beer and play softball?" I said yes. They said, "Okay, you can come be a volunteer fireman." I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And it just clicked. I mean, God wanted me to be there that day and for that to happen. And my whole life then became about the fire service and my own journey through the fire service. And that's really where the book starts. That day I walked into the firehouse, and then, 44 years later, the day I leave the National Fire Academy, which is bittersweet, but everybody has to move on. And then trying to put this book together was a way of capturing that 44-year experience to help other people, both in the fire service and outside of the fire service, really come to understand how I see the world and why I see it that way. And then hopefully that will influence them to make their lives a little safer, whether they're a civilian or a firefighter, when it comes to this phenomenon that we call fire, that kills and injures us, and it's just a challenge that we as society haven't really addressed yet. And so anyway, that's I was a volunteer in PG County the whole time. I was a career firefighter in Washington D.C. Then I went to the National Fire Academy. Again, what a blessing! I was 30, and they asked me to come work there, and wow, what an opportunity! And then just all the things that the Fire Academy has been able to achieve in the whole fire service nationally over those time periods. I was there. I observed it. I put my fingerprints on that knife, and it's just a wonderful experience. I'm just so blessed to have had this opportunity, and so that's where we're at. And,
How long were you at the academy, Burt?
I was at the academy for 34 years.
Okay.
From the time I was 30 till I was 64, so 34 years, from 1970 to 2014.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, the book you wrote is called "I Can't Save You, But I'll Die Trying: The American Fire Culture." What inspired that title?
Well, it took 44 years to get to that statement. And the book kind of is my own personal evolution over time to get to that statement. And as you know, for the past since about 2001, I've been actually thinking about the fire service and its culture, and been concentrating on that, and then trying to find models that help explain why the fire service and society looks at fire a certain way. And I do believe if we really want to make changes, it's about changing that cultural mindset. And one of the couple of paragraphs I wrote is that right now, when a civilian dies, people think it's an act of God, and when a firefighter dies, people think it's part of the job. And those two fundamental principles are incorrect. When a civilian dies or when a firefighter dies, something went wrong. And society has to take at least 51% responsibility for those events, because we create the environment, we create the culture that allows that to happen. And that's how I've evolved over this time. Now, the exact title, it's interesting. I actually came up with that phrase at a conference, and it was my closing slide at a conference. And I made that statement, I can't save you, but I'll die trying. I told the audience, I said, this is going to be the title of my next article that I write, but I'm not going to write it for the fire service. I want to write it for the general population. And I actually did. I wrote about a 1,500-word essay, hopefully with my big head, thinking I was going to get the New York Times to publish it in the editorial section. So I sent it to them, and they never wrote back. So obviously they didn't think it was worthwhile to be published. But it stayed in my mind, So then when I decided to put the book together, and I was looking for a title of the book, it just fell into place. So again, I was being led in a direction that should be the title, because it came to me, and then I thought about the book and putting it all together. I think it's a very controversial statement. You've seen the photograph on the front cover too.
Yeah.
Because I don't just want the fire service to read the book. Principally, I want citizens to read the book, because citizens have a perception that if their home catches on fire, the firemen are going to come save them. And I think that's a misconception. And I know it's hard for firefighters to grasp that too, but that's more true than not. And that's a hard thing to overcome, to say, well, if you have a fire in your home, if you don't have working smoke alarms, don't rely on me to come save you. I'll do my best, and I may get killed trying to save you, but there certainly is no guarantee I'm going to be able to save you. And if you don't have sprinklers in your building, I can't guarantee I'm going to protect the property that you own or your neighbor's property. I'm going to do the best I can, but there's going to be loss, and I may even get killed trying to protect this property. So all of us, we can all do better when it comes to this notion of fire safety. And every individual has to go through this personal journey to think about fire safety for themselves, their loved ones, their businesses, whether they're a civilian or a firefighter. And I think we all can do better. And that's what I've tried to do my whole career. I've always tried to do better, to learn something new, to try something new, to get better at this fire service discipline, and then help others. Just like I was helping the kids when I learned how to swim because I was taller than everybody else. Well, I think I've continued that process, and where that comes from, Rich, I have no idea. My higher power. Even when I go back and look at the book, I can't imagine that I wrote that book came out of me. It's just been an amazing journey, and this is the next chapter in the life of Burt Clark in terms of what he's trying to do, and so that's probably more than anybody ever wanted to know, but that's where we're at.
Okay, you when you wrote the book, it was parsed into sections. Excuse me. And I'd like to just go through and let you talk a little bit about each of these sections. Mm-hmm. The first one, excuse me, is the firefighter's genes: fast, close, wet, risk, injury, death. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, again, that whole chapter is really about my own progression to understand our fire culture and why we behave the way we behave today. And the significant learning event that I had was when I found a book by about culture by Edgar Schein out of MIT. And I actually went and took a class from Dr. Schein up in Massachusetts. And so his book and his theory about where culture comes from really helped me hone in and explain for myself my own behavior, and then the behavior of firefighters around me, and then the behavior of society in general when it comes to our present day culture, where it comes from, and even predicting some of our future fire culture if we don't have some kind of intervention. And Schein basically says that culture is made up of three levels. There's the artifacts; those are the things that we can see and touch. For example, at the firehouse, they would be the fire truck, the fire hose, the fire gear, the SCBA. In society, they would be the kinds of rules and regulations and laws that we have about fire. An immediate one that comes to mind is the whole smoke detector phenomenon. It wasn't until the mid-'70s that smoke detector technology was even available, that somebody could have a device that would alert you early in the fire to get you out. So, and today, many states have mandatory smoke detector ordinances. So our culture has changed. We see smoke detectors as important. But then at the same time, today when there's a fire fatality, most of the time there are no working smoke detectors. And it's a shock to the fire service when that happens. And then we rush out and go around the neighborhood and try to get people to put smoke detectors in. But wait for something bad to happen. If we know that the problem is if you don't have a working smoke detector, your chances of survival are not that great. Why don't we, if we know that, why don't we do it up front and not wait for something bad to happen to then go back and fix it.
Right.
For example, one of the articles I wrote was about response time and how everybody reports their response time. And if your response time isn't within a fire truck, if your response time isn't within a certain window, the elected officials rattle things, and we use response time to close fire stations, to keep fire stations open. We put this response time number out there. Even NFPA has a response time standard that we're all supposed to meet. Well, that's okay, but you and I both know that by the time we get the call, in many cases it's too late. The real critical time for human survival is when the fire starts, when the occupants are notified that there's a fire, and then when they behave. And we haven't even been called yet. So, and we don't spend enough time dealing with that. So the challenge I put out there, you can talk about your response time, but tell me the percentage of people who have working smoke detectors in your first due area or your city right now. That's a more important measurement of fire safety than how fast your fire trucks get there. Now, that goes against everything we've ever been taught. It goes against what even society believes. Because society believes that if we race to your house, we're going to save you. Well, that doesn't happen a lot of times. Mm-hmm. And somebody has to be able to say that the number of working smoke detectors in your community is a little bit more important than how fast the fire truck gets there. And so that's a way of looking at that culture, those artifacts, and what we believe. But then Shine goes on to say that what drives all of our behavior is this underlying DNA, and that's where the whole fast, close, wet, risk, injury, and death comes from. So if you go back to Ben Franklin, that's what I went. I went back to Ben Franklin. What was driving his firefighters? Chief Alan Brunacini also did some of this research. He came up with the first ones, fast, close, and wet, in one of his articles that he wrote. And then I added the risk, injury, and death to make it those six. And you can trace almost everything we do to trying to get us to be faster, get closer, make it wetter. We're supposed to be reducing our risk, but I think we increase our risk. And we treat injury and death of civilians and firefighters as an act of God or as part of the job if it's a firefighter. And, those fundamental principles need to be changed. And hopefully that chapter or that section sets the tone of some of my foundational understanding of the American fire culture.
Now, as you called the book, or subtitled the book, The American Fire Culture, right. Let's talk about the non-American fire culture. Is it different other places?
I do think so. I'm not an expert on other countries. I would never, you got to go talk to Phil Shaneman to get the expert about the other countries. But from what I read and from what I know, and the limited amount that I have studied it, the other cultures do see fire not as something as just an act of God. They consider it a really bad thing, and they don't rely totally on their fire departments to be able to solve the problem. They have a much more built-in, robust fire protection model. They put much more responsibility on the citizens not to have fires. And if you do have a fire, you are seen as causing that. We're here, we rush to your aid, we give you a free apartment, we solve everything, and then we just do the same thing over again. We're not getting at fixing the problem. At one time, I haven't looked lately, for industrialized world, we were at the top in terms of firefighter fatalities and civilian fatalities compared to other countries. Now, we may have changed that a little bit. I haven't looked recently. But that's why it says the American fire culture. I think it's a very unique thing to us, and that's what I'm most familiar with, and that's why I said the American fire culture, not just firefighters, but the civilians, because we're all in the same boat together, so we can all do better.
One of the things that stood out to me when I was talking with someone who was from another country, and he was talking about how aggressive we fight fires compared to the country that he was from. And he said one thing and this was years ago, but he said something that kind of stuck with me. And he said the difference between our country and your country is our firefighters don't take it personally when a building is on fire. We don't arrive and see that as the enemy that we have to beat or we have to kill, or if the building burns down, we've lost and it's won. He says we just don't have that emotional attachment to fire like it's some kind of enemy. It's just a job to be done. We'll do our best job, and if we get it out, super. If we don't get it out and the building burns down, we don't go home and sulk about it. And that's kind of always stuck with me as a mindset that some of our firefighters have that might be creating this risk, as you had talked about earlier. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that I would agree with that outside observation, that we do romanticize the whole firefighting industry, in terms of us thinking of ourselves as heroes, even though we say we don't think ourselves as heroes. Everybody wants to do the big save. We teach people to do that. We teach people that you've got to get in there, you got to do a primary search, you got to get in there, do a secondary search. The building's not vacant until I say it's vacant. This kind of stuff. So I think we do romanticize the fire service and what we do. I think a lot of it's connected with our military background. When a soldier is killed in battle, it's a heroic act. It's been that way from the French general, who said, "Give me enough ribbon and I can conquer the world." That's because he would give awards to people that got hurt. Mm-hmm. Well, that made him, want to fight that much harder. Well, we give our highest awards to those that are sometimes not following their own protocols and SOPs. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, many times they're violating their own SOPs. They just luck out and survive. And so we keep perpetuating that idea that we are there to lay down our life for somebody else. And even the Bible says that, the blessed are those that lay down their life for their friend. Well, at every firefighter's funeral, you hear that statement. So we keep, and society thinks that too. Mm-hmm. So we keep perpetuating that idea that when a firefighter dies, it's part of the job and they're a hero. Mm-hmm. And what that does, it gives us permission not to fix the root cause of the problem. And I think the root cause of this culture piece is that from Ben Franklin to today, the fire service model has basically been a manual fire protection model, meaning that when a fire starts, a group of people have to get on something and race to where the fire is and then put it out, as opposed to an automatic fire protection model, where when a fire starts, there's something automatically that tells people, hey, there's a fire in your building, get out. Then there's something that automatically puts water where the fire is, a sprinkler. So we've had that technology with sprinklers over 100 years. But it's taken us this long and the industrial side learned this very quickly, because it was economically unacceptable to lose their business. Mm-hmm. So the industrial side sprinkled stuff very early on. But when it comes to human life, we didn't have that same monetary value system that required sprinklers in everything from the time they were available. And it's only now that we're getting some fire protection, built-in fire protection or sprinklers in residential occupancies. Mm-hmm. But even today, there are states last time I counted, it was like 36 states that have passed legislation that says you cannot have a mandatory building code at the state level for mandatory sprinklers. Now, you may be able to have it locally. Some of them would say you can't have it locally. So we're still stuck on this manual fire protection model that a bunch of people have to get on a fire truck and race to this location and try to put the fire out. Whereas I think a lot of the rest of the world is not stuck on that manual fire protection model.
Mm-hmm.
They know if there's a fire, it needs to be compartmentalized. They have the built-in fire protection, and we don't expect firefighters to come die trying to save you if it's not savable. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think the American fire culture is kind of unique that way.
Okay. Another section of the book, I wanted to switch gears here. I want to get through some of these different sections of the things you talked about in the book. Is called it's actually in the form of a question, a statement and a question. Seatbelt saves lives. Why don't we wear them?
Yeah. Well, really once I found this, I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg, but for the last 10 years of my career at the Fire Academy, really the two things that I thought a lot about and wrote a lot about were seatbelts and firefighters calling Mayday. And if you think about it, those two constructs are at the opposite end of what a firefighter will ever have to do in their career. But they are very connected when you look at our model. And for the same reason that firefighters were reluctant to put their seatbelt on is part of the reason why they don't call Mayday, because they don't think they need to. They're willing to take that risk, and it may be too late. Even though we're taught to do it, the equipment is there, we just didn't do it. And why is that? And we come up with all kinds of excuses. So I used those two behaviors, if you will, because Shine also says you can't change culture just by saying we need to change our culture. He says you have to change culture one behavior at a time. So the two behaviors I concentrated on were seatbelts and Mayday. Partly because they interest me, partly because whether you're the New York City Fire Department or the Emmitsburg Volunteer Fire Department, those two behaviors are in front of you. It doesn't matter if you're career or volunteer, whether you go to 1,000 fire calls a year or 100 fire calls a year, you have to make those two personal decisions. And they are a personal decision, but then the organizational structure has to be there to help you make those decisions in a positive way. And if you don't, the consequences can be devastating. So that's why I try to dig in to understand the culture behind those two things, and then try to influence that culture to get people to change their behavior. So, and also part of that process is my own personal evolution about myself wearing seatbelts and what I was willing to stick my neck out to do for myself, for other people around me, or myself calling Mayday or teaching people how to call Mayday and where that came from. So those, I think that will help people, both citizens and firefighters, understand this big macro culture thing, if you will, much more down to an individual behavior level. I think American society would be shocked to find out how many firefighters don't wear their seatbelt. Mm-hmm. And they would never condone that if they knew that that's how we were behaving. That's basically why that's there.
What slays me is the number of firefighters that I talk to that when they're in their personal vehicle with their kids in the car, right, everybody's seatbelted, but when they're on the fire engine, they don't wear a seatbelt.
Right. Well, it goes back to that culture stuff. We think we need to be fast. It's that first one, fast. I need to be there fast. Anything that interferes with me being fast, like putting my seatbelt on, I'm going to ignore. And society gives me permission to do that. Some states actually give firefighters permission in their state laws not to wear their seatbelt. So that's how we're all connected to this, right? So that's why we all have a piece of this. And firefighters are killed because they don't have their seatbelt on. We kill civilians racing to this fire, going through red lights. And then the law shields us from gross negligence. So nobody's held accountable when something bad happens. Something went wrong. And all of us need to be able to say, yes, we can change this. We can make little changes, and it'll make a big difference in the outcome if we all admit to the real truth of stuff.
Burt, you've been in the business a long time, both as a responder and as a researcher and as a teacher. Have you ever seen or heard of the case where the outcome would have been different if not for the time that was taken to put on a seatbelt?
No. Meaning that putting a seatbelt on caused a bad thing to happen?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't. No, there is no such thing.
I it was almost rhetorical. I knew the answer was so obvious.
Yeah.
But
There
when we
no-
say it, it seems so foolish, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but that's how powerful that culture is. That notion that I'm a smart person. I would never drive to the firehouse without my seatbelt on. I would never let my kids put their seatbelt on. Yet when I get on a fire truck, I don't put mine on. If I'm the driver, I don't require everybody else to do it. If I'm the officer, I don't do what the rules and regulations say. And if I'm a battalion chief, I don't enforce the seatbelt policy. So, and then we're surprised when somebody gets hurt. Well, that's because we allowed that to happen. And it's when it comes to this fast, close, wet, risk, injury, and death. That's why that whole DNA and gene model is so powerful. It's like, in society in general, we're like alcoholics and drug addicts. We are addicted to those notions that a fire truck racing to my house is going to save me. And anything that in my mind slows up that fire truck response is a bad thing, and I don't have to do it, even if it kills me. Well, that gives that, so everybody buys into the fact, well, no, firemen don't have to put their seatbelt on. Firemen don't have to stop at red lights. And if they run over a civilian, oh, well, they were trying to go save somebody else. And then we'll pass a law that says firemen don't have to stop at red lights. Firemen don't have to put their seatbelts on. So we continue this dysfunctional belief. And we're so addicted to this that we can't see it. The alcoholic and drug addict does not know that the addiction is killing them, and they have to. It's like we have to go into 28-day detox, right, to realize no. If I put my seatbelt on, nobody in my town's going to die. If I stop at red lights, nobody's going to die. So that's how this model helps us. That we have to come to see what we're doing as dysfunctional, and then have the courage to try the new behavior, and then have the organization reinforce the correct behavior. I'll just give an example. A fire department I was working with down in Tennessee, very early adapters with seatbelts. Carol and I went down there and helped them. And I'll give them lots of credit. It was the Oak Ridge Fire Department in Tennessee. I just wrote an article for Christmas time about them. And so we did the workshop. They wear their seatbelts, do all the right stuff. And then I see this on a Facebook account where they're going to have Santa Claus drive around town. And last year, Santa Claus, the elves are sitting on top of the fire truck, and Santa Claus is up there in a chair, but nobody's got their seatbelt on. So I thought, they don't even see the risk that that's creating. So I left a message for the assistant chief, and lo and behold, they were shocked into the reality that, oh my goodness, we're violating our own seatbelt policy. So quickly, they put the elves in the fire truck, and they bolted down the seat and they put a seatbelt in for Santa Claus. And it wasn't until they were, that danger was invisible to them. They did not see it because they're a great fire department. Yet for that one little thing, they did not see it. So, that's one of the proudest things I've done is just call them up and say, hey, got to put a seatbelt on Santa Claus. And they did. They could have just said, blow it up your whatever, Clark. But they once it was pointed out to them, they were able to change that behavior and send a very powerful message. And the firefighters they bought into it quickly. As soon as it was mentioned to them by the chief, they understood what they were doing and they fixed the problem. But they had been doing that for years, and they just didn't see that problem. Mm-hmm. So
I think a lot of ways we're so close to our problems that we don't see them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that DNA. We didn't see that risk. We did not see that risk that we were creating. Mm-hmm. It was just invisible to us.
Yep. All right. One of the sections of your book is best practices, and there's seven articles under the topic of best practices. What are some of the best practices that you share out in the book?
Well, again, they were events that, as in most of the articles in there, like everybody else, I'm going along in life and just dealing with everything every day. But every once in a while, something happens. Dr. Morris Massey refers to as a significant emotional event. Something happens that then you say, I need to fix this. This isn't right. And so those are most of the articles in there. And really the first one is I was on the DC Fire Department, and we had just started with smoke detectors. And I was driving to work one morning, and the radio announcer was talking about how there was a fire and there were fire fatalities, and it took the fire department half hour to put it out and went to suck alarm, something like that. But they never once mentioned what could have been done to prevent the fire or what could have been done to help the people survive. So that was my big epiphany. Here we have a perfect time to get people to because now we have the public's attention. Somebody's died. How do we capitalize on that to make everybody else safer? So I was lucky enough to be in a position. We started this program called Operation Return, where after the original news show, we actually went out, went back to the scene, identified impact smoke detectors, identified problems, and then called the TV stations to get them to tell the rest of the story, that this fatality did not have to happen. Something went wrong. What can be done better to save the people? And many times there was no smoke detector. Well, we did that in 1977 or 78. Well, when you listen to radio shows or TV shows today, they talk about fire fatalities, but most of the time they still don't talk about whether or not there were smoke detectors working, whether there was a sprinkler system, what could have been done to prevent the fire or help the people be able to survive the fire. So that's an example of that best practice. That's something every fire department in the country could do if they wanted to. Another one is when I read the book In Search of Excellence by Peters and Waterman, the whole notion of what's the best fire department. If you go into a classroom with 25 people and say, okay, everybody here has got the second best fire department in their state, raise their hand. Nobody raises their hand, right? Because they've all got the first best fire department. Well, if everybody's the best, then what's the need to get better? How do we measure success in the fire service? How do we measure best? And I used the Peters and Waterman book to apply to the fire service. And then we identified what we thought were the 25 best fire departments, why they were that way. We tried to come up with some numbers that you could calculate and stuff. And it was pretty controversial. A lot of people called up and said, hey, how come I wasn't one of the 25 best? So I think we need to have that. We need to know what the standard is, and are we meeting that standard? And so there's several articles in there about trying to reach that standard, both organizationally and even personally. One of the articles in there is titled, Am I a Competent and Courageous Firefighter? And it really was, again, a personal epiphany with a couple of examples of things that happened to me that, have really made me question my own courage to do the right thing. And then, courage is not about running into a burning building. Courage is about doing the right thing 100% right, 100% of the time when everybody else around you is not. I think that takes more courage, because you're going up against the masses, whether it's getting people in a fire truck to put their seatbelt on, whether it's making sure everybody stops at stop lights, whether it's making sure all the smoke detectors in your families and relatives' homes work. How many firefighters have relatives that their smoke detectors aren't working in their parents' or grandparents' or children's home? Probably more than we want to expect. Well, who's more responsible for making sure that happens than their firefighter family member? And then finally, there's one in there about that response time issue. That I coined the phrase that response time is the white elephant of the fire service. That we all hang our hat on this thing, but it's not the most important matrix for us. And as long as we think it is, we can't move away from this manual fire protection model to an automatic built-in fire protection model. But that's where we as a society need to go if we really want to have a safer fire safety society.
Now, did I understand right that you said you actually made a list of what you, by that criteria, that what you had considered to be the best fire departments?
Yes, right.
And is that list in the book?
Yes, that list is in the book. Yep. And basically, it's a and we followed the Peters and Waterman recommendations in terms of how they did it. They did it in the business world. So we tried to find this corollaries in the fire service world that were measurable. I don't remember them off the top of the head, but for example, one of them was, and the Peters and Waterman book looked at trends over time, profit sharing, cost benefit ratios, all those kind of things. So again, I had a class of my students go through this and come up with a list. Things like a reduction in firefighter injuries. So we looked at 5 years worth of data, and if a fire department could show that their firefighter injury rates were going down, that was a pretty good indication that they were doing a good job. Another one was if their percentage of city budget was going up, that was a good thing too, because they were convincing people to invest more money in the fire service. The types of services that they were offering. So we tried to do it with numbers, just like they do in the business community, to identify which were the top performers. And again, that's all explained in the article. And those were before all the national standards were coming out.
Well, about what year did you do that?
I think that's I think it's 85, 84, 85.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you revisited that since you did it?
I have not.
Okay. I'm just curious as to where they would, if the list would be different, or who has sustained themselves over time.
Yep.
And stayed on the list.
And you're exactly right. That'd be a great dissertation, wouldn't it?
It sure would. As I look down the list, I see a number of fire departments that I have done programs for that I'd say, yeah, these departments got it going on. They got their stuff together. And I don't see any on the list that have flown red flags for me. But there's a number of them that I haven't been to. But all the ones that are here that I've been to, I'm not surprised to see them on this list.
It's amazing that sometimes we forget. Sometimes the fire departments that are on that list don't even know they were on the list. I'll go talk to them or give them a copy of the article. I say, a chief a company officer, I'll give them a copy of the article and say, I didn't know this. So part of the problem is we don't even when we do good stuff, we don't even share that information with other folks.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, for the sake of the people, to get them to buy the book and see how it is that you came up with this criteria. And again, some years ago the research was done, but let me just share can I share the names of the departments that are on the list?
Absolutely, that'll get them interested.
Yeah, Alexandria, Virginia; Bloomington, Minnesota; Charlotte, North Carolina; Charlotte, Vermont; Charlottesville, Virginia. These are alphabetical, not by the order of best to worst. Colorado Springs, Colorado; Dallas, Texas; Fairfax, Virginia; Fort Worth, Texas; Lancaster, PA; Los Angeles, California; Louisville, Kentucky; Memphis, Tennessee; Miami, Florida; Midwest City, Oklahoma; New York City; Palm Beach, Florida; Phoenix, Arizona; Salt Lake City, Utah; San Clemente, California; San Diego, California; San Jose, California; Seattle, Washington; Virginia Beach, Virginia; and West Sedona, Arizona. And you have the list there, and you have who you interviewed and who the fire chief is and such. So, yeah, let's segue to... This might be a natural segue to another section of your book where you talk about pursuit of higher education. I mean, what you did there it's research based. It wasn't just I've heard some nice things about them, so I'll put them on the list. There was actually research based on Peters and Waterman's work with In Search of Excellence. So let's segue to talk about the section called Pursuit of Higher Education.
Sure. For a long time, I came to realize that what I was being taught was in many cases not based on science and research. It was based on just how one fire department did something, and every fire department thinks they do it the exact right way, even though it may not be the way everybody else does it. So, and then we go back to, well, the NFPA says we should do it that way. But again, the NFPA in many cases is not based on science and research either. It's based on a bunch of people coming together and coming to consensus about something. And consensus is not necessarily science and research. So again, through the evolution of going to school, and I credit a lot of it with Frank Brannigan. There's an article specifically about Frank in here. He really did shape my understanding of the fire service discipline and the notion that a profession needs to be based on science and research, not experience and consensus, was really another epiphany for me. And so I've tried to model my own understanding of stuff that way throughout my career, and tried to influence people around me to think that way. And then, so even when you go back to the original the original wing spread conference in 1966, they said that higher education was really the first step for an occupation to become accepted as a profession. And they put together a model in terms of what the fire service needed, and even at the PhD level. Now, over time, that's kind of been lost. We have a lot of associate degree programs. We have a lot of bachelor degree programs. Now today we have some master's degree programs. Very few PhD level programs about the fire service. There may be some in fire protection engineering, but that's not necessarily the fire service. And since 9/11, the whole emphasis of fire service has kind of been lost. We're all now worried about terrorists. We're not worried about the single family dwelling fire. Now most recently, thanks to NIST and UL, that's starting to change. We're starting to put some science behind putting wet stuff on red stuff, or ventilating the building, or what that stuff means. So we're getting there, and we're even fighting that. We're fighting against ourselves. That's because I don't know that we're taught to understand that professions have to be based on science and research. And again, that section is my own personal evolution to come to the understanding, my own pursuit of a doctorate, me helping other people get their doctorates, which I'm very proud of. I think I've been on 15 dissertation committees, and I've got several more in the works right now. But the fundamental problem lies in the fact that you still can't go someplace and get a PhD in fire service studies. We should be able to study engine company operations at the PhD level, truck company operations at the PhD level, smooth bore, solid bore PhD level, and even the social kind of skills. There was a great incident that just happened that Kurt Verone wrote about Rhode Island in terms of its a labor issue about hours of work, and how the Rhode Island Supreme Court decided that how many, if I get this right, how many shifts you have is the same as hours. So instead of having 4 platoons, the Supreme Court said you can go to 3 platoons because that's management's right to determine what your shift system are. But they missed the fact that the fire service, when it comes to shifts, is not like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So we as a discipline have had to use other disciplines, theories, and constructs, and then tried to apply them to us, square peg, round hole, because we don't have the research in our own occupation. And that's one of the things I think we're still missing to this day. And we at least need to have one PhD program where people can study situational awareness at the PhD level,
Mm-hmm.
where people can study fire culture at the PhD level, where people can study, fire truck response at the PhD level.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have that. So that's another soapbox that I'm going to be on for the rest of my career, however God gives me to last that way. But I think again, if we need to have that, we need to evolve to have that PhD level research, and we're not there yet. And we as a discipline have to say it's important to us.
Mm-hmm.
We can go off, and the federal government pays firefighters or fire chiefs to go study terrorism, but more people die from fires than die from terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Well,
so that's a fundamental problem.
I agree with you. When I did my PhD dissertation, it was on fireground decision making, and then it moved into situational awareness. I had a really hard time getting my dissertation committee to agree to allow me to even go in the direction of the neuroscience of decision making and how important situational awareness is for first responders. They kept trying to push me away from that topic because it was not something that they could grasp or understand or appreciate or wrap their minds around, that there was value in this. And it was really tough to get them to yes. I eventually did, and I'm thankful that I did, but it was not a fire science based program. So
right.
These were non-fire service dissertation committee people,
Mm-hmm.
with one exception. I did get them to let me have a visiting scholar,
Mm-hmm.
and I got Dr. Kiefer from the
Yep.
Fire Academy to be the visiting scholar on my committee. And if not for him convincing them that there was value in this, my whole life would have gone a different direction. So,
and that's prevalent to this day too. That's how I've been. I've always been a visiting person on committees. I was one committee chair at one time, but because the higher education infrastructure does not see the fire service discipline as something worthy of being studied at that level, but they'll jump on terrorism like white on rice because there's money out there for that.
mm-hmm.
And there's really not a lot of money for the fire service to be studied. There's money on EMS because that comes out of the medical profession.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody says, "Well, Burt, we don't need to study fire service at PhD level because most of our runs are EMS." That's okay, but the people with MD after their name, they're going to tell you what to do, how to do, when to do, and they do lots of research. The people with MD after their name about what to do on the ambulance, but nobody's doing the real research in terms of what to do when you're on the fire truck, and it's the stuff on the fire truck that kills us and kills multiple people. When you're EMT got one patient, when you're responding on a fire truck, you're going to have a house full of people. It's not just a difference in degree; it's a difference in kind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think the fire service needs to have at least one PhD level program where that's the concentration to create our knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
And right off the bat, for example, I think the stuff that NIST and UL is doing is excellent. But as you know, as a scientist, the problem is and that's why people get to push back, because now they're doing it in a laboratory setting. It needs to be tried clinically. In other words, we need to try it in the field, because the field is uncontrollable as opposed to the laboratory.
Right.
So that's why firefighters can say, well, they say do it this way, but when I roll up, I can't do it that way. Well, the firefighter may be right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we need to do the clinical study of this on in real situations, and then do the real research related to the actual practice on the house, on the fire, and then collect that data so we can find out if the laboratory bench level stuff really translates into real world fireground activities. And you need people trained to be able to do that. And we don't have that today, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Hey, if somebody wanted to, is the book out, or is it been released yet? How do they get it? How do they get a copy?
Well, yeah, you can order it from the publisher, and the publisher is Premium Press America, and they are available at www.premiumpressamerica, all one word, .com. And so the suggested retail price is $29.95, as most everything is, with 95 cents on the end of it. So you can also call that number. They have a toll-free number, which is 800-891-7323. Repeat, 800-891-7323. I guess if you're in Tennessee, because the publisher's in Tennessee, you can call 615-353-7902. Again, repeat, if you're in state, it's in Tennessee, it's 615-353-7902, or you can fax them. And their fax number is 615-353-7905. Repeat, 615-353-7905.
Okay, and I will put that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Yep. So for those who are listening to this show, you just go to samatters.com/38. There will be show notes there with all the information about how to get the book. It'll also have Dr. Clark's contact information, so if you want to follow up with him, ask him questions, maybe bring him in to do some work with your department or a presentation for your conference. I know he does a lot of traveling and sharing of his message, and every time that he does, I see the social media lighting up with the feedback from the people just saying how awesome the message is. So, you know, your lifetime of experience, starting with as a kid in the shallow end of the pool, the tall kid, all the way to today has turned into an asset for the American Fire Service. And thank you so much for giving back your knowledge, not only in live programs, but in this book. And you gave me the benefit of having an advanced copy. And as I looked down through the articles, I found myself nodding again. Oh my God, this is it. This is This is exactly what needs to be said. For some, it's going to be controversial. For some, they're going to close the book and curse at you, which we had talked about is, stirring those emotions and getting those conversations happening is so important to how change occurs. To get people to actually then share what they're thinking and how they're feeling. And I think this book is going to stir a lot of conversations, if not even beyond the fire service, in for the general read of people talking about how they can be better prepared for fire, and maybe change their expectations of the fire department serving their community. So, Dr. Clark, Burt, thank you for being a guest with me today. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Rich, and I'll see you out at Firehouse World, if we can plug that.
Yeah.
And I should have the book there with me for sale, and I'll also be signing some books there. So I look forward to seeing all our friends out there in Firehouse World. It'll be warmer for us that are on the East Coast. And so again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to come on your show. I don't think I've ever been on your show before.
No, you're free. Well, the show's kind of new, so don't feel like you were left behind. I've only had just a handful of guests. Most of my guests are people who've survived close call events, sure. And other than that, I've had very few guests besides the people who've had that close call story to tell. So when you and I were talking, in fact, you got contact with me about another guest that I had, and you said, hey, I want to contact him. What's his information? I said, well, I need to get you on and talk about your book. So that was just perfect timing on the call.
Well, it's great. So I appreciate everything you do, Rich, and thank you for the opportunity. And I'll certainly see you out at Firehouse World.
All right. Thank you, Burt. Well, that's it. Episode 38 is complete. Thank you to Dr. Burt Clark for taking some time from your busy schedule to talk with me today and to give us a glimpse into your new book. Thank you to our sponsor, Midwest Fire. And thank you, our listeners, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I sincerely appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. If you've experienced or witnessed a near miss and would like to be interviewed on this show, visit samatters.com. Click on the Contact Us link, and thank you in advance for sharing your lessons so that others may live. If you like the show, please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio and search for SA Matters Radio, SA Matters Radio, and subscribe to the podcast and leave your feedback. If you like the show, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a 5-star review as well. Not only will that motivate me to work harder, but it'll also help others to find the show. If you've been inspired and want to learn more about situational awareness, consider becoming a member of the SA Matters community. It's free, and when you sign up, you'll receive that special report that I talked about earlier, 25 Best Practices for Improving First Responder Safety. To claim your free gift, head over to samatters.com, click on the red box on the right side of the homepage. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.